Welcome back, everyone. Week 3, a recap of the legislative session, along with North Dakota United President Nick Archuleta. I'm Tom Gerhardt. Things are really starting to hum a little bit at the Capitol, Nick, but I wanted to let people know, listening in, a way to keep track of what's going on besides just listening to us. We have a great page on our website. If you go to ndunited.org, at the top of the page you'll see a button, 2021 Legislative Session. If you click on that, you can find a tab for frequently asked questions, a tab for news, latest news and headlines, ways to contact your legislators, and bills of interest. And if you click on that, you can find just about anything of the over 130 some bills
that we're tracking
right now. Also advocacy connections as well. So also, if you have any questions, please put them in the thread below this Facebook post, and we'll be happy to get back to you throughout the week. But let's turn to you now, Nick, and as we mentioned, there's a lot of bills that we're tracking. Maybe just a quick week in review.
Yeah, well, the legislature is finding its pace and it's moving right along. We're seeing people, because the deadlines are coming up on when to submit bills, a lot of them have hit the floor, and a lot of them impact the members of North Dakota United. And we're very, very busy tracking those bills.
Let's start with House Bill 1281.
Yeah, this was a bill that I offered some testimony on earlier this week. This is it's basically a tax credit for non-public and home schools. And that might sound just fine, but this is another one of those bills, frankly, that's a voucher bill. And their sole purpose is to divert monies that are raised for public education to private education and homeschooling. Not only that, but there's money will come right out of the general fund, and so things like improvements for public employees' working conditions, all of those things are impacted anytime you divert publicly raised monies for private schools or homeschools. So we testified in opposition to this bill.
All right, and coming up next week, we'll get to that a little bit later, but another similar bill.
For sure.
Senate Bill 2003, that's the higher ed budget, and the Senate Appropriations got to hear from all 11 of our institutions plus this week. So this is just really preliminary, but it does set the table for important decisions.
It does, and the thing about 2003, you're right, it sets the budget for individual universities as well as the North Dakota University system. And what we have to take from this is that university presidents were one right after another coming into the Senate Appropriations Committee and then discussing what's going on in their universities, how their efforts to complete their missions are going. And to a person, they talked about how budget cuts over the course of the last few legislative sessions have really impacted in a negative way their ability to conduct their missions and to achieve their goals. And so almost to a person, they were adamant in not wanting any more cuts. There is no more fat. We're past the meat and we're cutting into the bone, and we have to be very, very careful going forward about how we treat higher education in this budget cycle.
Several newspaper headlines I saw alluded to that point this week too, as you mentioned, down to the bone.
Right, and here's something that I think was North Dakota State University released a study, and they found out in the year 2019 that the universities had a $5.5 billion with a B. Boy, that's a lot of billions. $5.5 billion impact on the economy of North Dakota. So when we take basically a meat axe to their budgets, we are actually hurting our own economy. And then not only that, but students are watching this, Tom. And so are other universities in other states. And if they're seeing that North Dakota's cutting, they're more than happy to go out and recruit these kids who might not, because of budget cuts, be able to take the courses in the order that they're offered. And that might extend then the amount of time they're in school by a semester or even a year. That just adds to the expense of university, and in the long run, these budget cuts will really cost North Dakota if we're not careful.
Certainly many bills this week. Another one we wanted to touch on, House Concurrent Resolution 3007.
Yeah, this, I don't know if you folks who are watching this or not understand this, but I assume you do. There is a rift between many legislators on the Republican side and the governor, who also happens to be a Republican. And there have been some hard feelings over some of these things, and some of them are ideological, and that's to be expected. Not everybody thinks in lockstep. But what the HCR 3007 would have done is it would lift the state of emergency that the governor declared back on March 13th, I believe it was, in 2020. And that might sound fine. For example, Representative Becker, who put this bill in, testified that, gosh, here we are 10 months, 11 months later, and we still have this emergency. We know so much about it now. We should just be able to call off the emergency. Well, there are unintended consequences with ending the emergency declaration, two of which affect teachers directly. One of them is, there happen to be in the form of two executive orders. One allows substitute teachers to remain in the class consecutively more than 10 days. And that has been very helpful for school districts and teachers, because when these outbreaks occurred, it was very difficult to get teachers to fill these roles. That particular executive order allowed those teachers to stay longer, and that helped to alleviate some of the strain. Excuse me. And the second one deals more with students. There is no provision in state law that students can get credit for courses they take via distance learning, except through the distance learning program in the state. But with that said, the governor had to issue an emergency order so that the kids could distance learn and receive credit for those courses taken, or even learn through a hybrid system that is part face-to-face, part distance learning. So you end the state of emergency, and guess what? Those go away, and those kids are now, you pull the rug off underneath those students, and you've exacerbated the staffing problem that many school districts are seeing. And so we, of course, I testified against that, because it just seemed like a knee-jerk thing to do. And worse than that, it didn't make any sense, because the minute, let's just say that the Senate concurred with that, great. So now the state of emergency is gone. The governor can, that very next minute, institute another state of emergency. It's his power to do so. So there you go. It's unnecessary legislation.
Well, that's a quick recap of week 3. Let's look ahead quickly to week 4, some bullet points on some bills that we're keeping an eye on, and House Bill 1369 is one of them.
House Bill 1369 is another one of those euphemistic bills that we see, but it is essentially like the 1281, the one that provided a tax break or tax credits for non-public and home schools. This is the same thing. What this does is it's another avenue, another means by which we can take monies that are raised for public education and divert them to private education. It's not right. The framers of our Constitution didn't believe in it. That's why they gave the authority to educate kids in the state to the state. And this is, again, unnecessary.
Unnecessary. And we should always mention, as the caveat, no problem with homeschooling or private education.
No, North Dakota United and our predecessor organization, the North Dakota Education Association, we've never had an issue or a problem with school choice. In fact, wherever you want to educate your students, that's certainly your business. But what we have always had a problem with is the state subsidizing that decision. So that is the sole basis of our objection.
House Bill 1413, school lunches.
Yeah, anybody that's ever taught knows how hard it is to teach kids that are hungry, or hangry, if you will. So what House Bill 1413 does, and it's a great faith effort, but it allocates $89.5 million for school lunches for every student, not just those kids who can't afford it. It is a wonderful idea. I believe. I have a feeling, though, that $89.5 million price tag might sour some legislators who may otherwise support it.
Senate Bill 2196, another bill next week.
Yeah, this establishes the competency framework, and what that is basically, Tom, without getting too deep into the weeds, is it is a way for students to earn, once they've proven mastery of a curriculum unit, they have the rest of that waived. So if they're able to prove that they're competent in that particular curriculum without completing the whole course, then they can be waived out of that, and then use that time for other educational pursuits. And we think this is probably a very good idea. First of all, it keeps kids motivated to learn, and it also increases their opportunities to learn more things.
Yeah, like it. Senate Bill 2257, Nick, after-school program, some monies for that.
Right. As you know, Tom, and everybody watching, this pandemic has really put some strain on students. There's no doubt about it. The interrupted face-to-face learning has caused some kids to maybe slip behind a little bit. What we are hoping is that if we can passed 2257, which allows up to $3.5 million to help schools start after-school programs. We can more readily catch those kids up to where we think they should be on their academic continuum, and avert more problems down the road.
Finally, Senate Bill 2235, Nick.
2235, that appropriates about $2.25 million to help. It'll go to the Department of Health to help schools hire school nurses. There is an incredible shortage of school nurses across the state, and not just across the state, nationally. That's the case. We have more students going to school with where there are policemen present than there are school nurses. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, that's fine. But we do think that the nurses, there's a definite need for them, and anything that we can do to encourage schools to hire them and help them to do so is a very good thing.
And just wanted to touch base, there are a number of PERS-related bills, as you mentioned, without getting into the weeds or too in-depth this early in the session. Be assured we're keeping our eyes peeled for all the developments there as well.
Absolutely. PERS is the Public Employees Retirement System. The legislature passed up a golden opportunity several sessions ago to fund its recovery after the big economic recession of 2008, 2009. They just didn't do that, and as a result, PERS is trending in the wrong direction. I spoke last week about testifying for 1% and a 1% increase, 1% from the employer, 1% from the employee. That helps to tick us in the right direction. But there are any number of PERS-related bills, and we are watching all of them. It's interesting to see that we have so much interest in it, and I think some really good faith efforts to make it better. But we also have been hearing some chatter that there are those at the legislature who would be content to let it go bankrupt. Well, first of all, that's unconstitutional. So I don't think that'll get legs. It'll take at least 100 years for it to go bankrupt, but a lot of trouble can happen between now and then. This is a benefit that actually helps the state a great deal. It helps them to recruit and retain the best employees possible, and they do. Our public employees, our state employees, have just been phenomenal throughout this pandemic and before that. Now there are fewer of them doing that work. So we need to support them in every way we can. One of them is to make sure that they have a decent retirement.
Yeah, quality of life issue for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, again, for any updates, if you want to click on any of the 130-some bills that we're following to this point, you can go to ndunited.org and click on the 2021 Legislative Session tab at the top of the screen. It's big and bold right there for you to see.
For sure.
And you can follow along and check for bills of interest, ways to contact your legislator again, find the latest news and some frequently asked questions. Hopefully we can answer for you. Again, if you have any questions after listening to us today, please feel free to put them in the comments section, and we will get back to you. For North Dakota United President Nick Archuleta, I'm Tom Gerhardt. See you again next week.
Very nice.